What's up, everyone? I'm Melissa Elise, and you're watching Melissa Elise TV. Welcome to my Billions Season 3, Episode 4 review, Hell of a Ride. And I do want to start by saying that I love when Billions does a flashback countdown episode, and this is the first of the season, so you know we're in for something special. So the opening scene shows Chuck Rhoades Sr. getting ready to give his statement of what happened between him, Chuck, and Ira. Of course, he's advised not to say anything until the magic words, immunity deal, are spoken. As Dake does in fact offer this deal, Chuck Sr. seems ready to tell what he knows. But first, we flash back to 3 days ago. There's a brief setup on day 3 of all the stakes for each player here, starting with Dake, who informs Chuck of Brian's role in bringing in his dad, and delivers a warning of how big of a problem this is. And while Chuck seems to get the message, he redirects and tells Dake to get his man under control. Then Axe and Wags take a leisurely stroll through a cemetery so Wags can show him the last available burial plot in New York, but more importantly so that the new Halls can inform Bobby on the cooperation of the lab that reported the ice juice virus. Speaking of cooperation, it looks like Ira is helping Axe by pointing him in Brian's direction so that the new Halls can give him the push he needs to go after Chuck and his dad. Finally, Chuck tells Wendy that he plans to go to his Yale reunion only so that he can speak to his dad and ask him not to turn on him. And it seems like Wendy's just realizing how bad it would be if Chuck Sr. does turn. But the majority of the action in this episode takes place on day 2, with Axe at a World Aid Summit where he's pitched an idea to invest in a solar company. Of course, Axe can't trade, so he puts it to Wags and the head of his foundation to get Taylor on board. They see through it, of course, but it was a good play, so Taylor goes for it anyway. And you have to admit, Axe was pretty brilliant in the end, taking Wendy's advice on taking losses and cannonballing himself into being voted off the World Aid Board so that they would in fact go for the solar investment. Chuck's performance, on the other hand, was not so skilled, as he hijacks his father's 50th Yale reunion and gives this sentimental speech he had to know was not going to work. And he has to resort to Foley to put his father's property investment in jeopardy just to get him on board. Brian isn't doing so hot either, as he approaches Chuck Sr. and gets told to back down. But he keeps pushing until Dake gives the go-ahead to bring him in. On day 1, some conclusions start to form as the B stories wrap up, with Wags getting his burial plot. But while Wags is happy, everyone else seems to be having a conflict of conscience. But that leads to a decision, like Chuck seeing Foley and deciding to press his advantage with his father's property. And then Axe speaks with Wendy about his fight to stay on the World Aid Board, and she pretty much advises him to let it go, which he kind of does, but at his and the foundation's benefit, since they pretty much decide to go with the solar pitch just to spite him. Then Chuck Sr. has lunch with his senator friend, who informs him of the change with his property investment, making it clear that he can either protect Chuck or lose his investment. The other side story showed the astronaut scientist guy that Wendy slept with last season finally going on his mission into space. And though Taylor and McPhee are rooting for him and his vision, the math just doesn't support it, leaving Taylor feeling a bit guilty about profiting from his death. And really, the whole plot line had this kind of cold-blooded feel to it. I had assumed that the spaceship was going to explode, but Dollar Bill and the rest of them celebrating it was kind of bad form. And it did clearly affect Wendy, but her advice to mine the truth that makes you money, though it's the right advice considering their field of work, just a bit cold-blooded. In the end, Chuck Sr. decides to protect his son and tells Dake and Brian that Ira is a liar. But this doesn't make things better between the Chucks, though Chuck did what was necessary, which apparently makes his dad proud. And Taylor eases their conscience by buying the same watch that the astronaut had, and then making a bold move by recognizing that they can't sit at the same table as Axe, not and keep their conscience clear. But you know what I really took away from this episode? Wags is gonna live until he's 90. That's actually really unlikely, but at least he knows where he's gonna be buried. Well, that's it for me, but the question of the week is, do you guys like the new halls? They're kind of weird, but I think I like them. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you're new here, consider subscribing for more episode reviews.